Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Pete Dougherty here on a beautiful Friday in Green Bay. Pete, the I'm not very good at math, but the temperatures seem to get cut in half overnight. I think we went from 70 to 35 today.
That was brutal. It was so nice yesterday, and then stepping outside today. And it's not even bitter cold or anything like that. But that's still a big drop.
Mhm.
But it's not cold enough to affect football. I don't, if the temperature, as long as the temperatures stay in the 30s.
Yeah. Still going to be a little cold, though, to welcome in two Southern teams next week, including a dome team. So, you know, whatever can work in your favor if you're the Packers right now, you want to work in your favor because very few things are. Um, and with that being said, let's just kind of jump right into this first question from John Wayne, who has told us his name is not actually John Wayne, but we like to think that. We like to call him the Duke. If this team doesn't finish at or above 500, can we expect front office changes, coaching changes? Is that even realistic? Pete?
I don't think it's realistic. No, they just extended the contracts of both the general manager and the coach last summer. I just find it almost impossible to believe they would make a change. Something really strange, almost non-football related, just something really, really weird would have to happen for Mark Murphy to let either Gutekunst or LaFleur go. That's just not happening.
I understand the money part of it. Um, I had an athletic director say once when he fired a coach unexpectedly in the middle of the season. He said, "What must be done eventually must be done immediately." And
Yes,
so I know the money part of it, but if your team is floundering, why not just go ahead and pull that cord?
because they have 3 years of 13 wins in the bank,
Mhm.
and Murphy, there's no way that they're going to fire guys who would. That's why they got contract extensions. It's not like these guys were new on their job. I mean, they got extensions. So one bad season, that's just not going to happen. The Packers operate much more. They basically operate like the Roonies. The Roonies won't.
Right.
They are really patient. They got their people. They when they get to like them, they stick with them. I mean, Mike Tomlin's had some really rough years. Cowher had some rough years, and they've had three coaches since like 1970 or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And the Packers are much more like that. So they're not going to fire these guys just after one bad season, even really bad season. I just do not see that happening.
So more so, you feel like the front office feels like this year is an anomaly, not the standard.
Well, I haven't. I mean, it's not like I'm not privy to, Mark Murphy's thoughts or the executive committee's thoughts, but I haven't observed how the team works, and they don't make rash, quick decisions like that. Even with McCarthy getting let go during the season, that thing had been deteriorating. And that in that case, it was who goes, the quarterback or the coach. That was going to be the coach because the quarterback was still, what was he, 30, 5 or whatever he was at that time.
That was four
Um,
years ago. So yeah, 34, 35.
yeah, so it's different scenario this time. And yeah, I mean, Ron Wolf always had the saying, you don't compound a mistake by keeping it. He was talking about players and that, even if you drafted them high, if they're not good at, if you don't like what you see after a couple of years, you got to cut them, or if you sign a free agent and you don't like him, even though you gave him a lot of money, you got to cut him. But this is a totally different situation. I mean, one bad season, they're not gonna just scuttle everything because of one bad season.
With that in mind, I want to pop Lindell's question up here real quick, but we can answer it really quickly. Why doesn't someone fire Murphy? Mark Murphy has to retire based on the bylaws when he reaches 70, and that's in 2.5 years. Summer of 25, I think.
That
So
is
yeah.
correct, and it's the executive committee hires and fires the president, so they would be the ones who would have to fire Murphy. Now he's been on the job since '08. That's a long time, and the executive committee is turned over. I'm pretty sure he's appointed everyone who's on the executive committee now. So I
So
think the chances of the executive committee firing him are pretty remote, or at least firing him after one bad season are really remote. That's just not happening.
mhm. We have a lot of questions in here about Eric Stokes. So let's stop and address that for a minute. Randy asks, is Eric Stokes out for the season? Interesting point of view from Karen, who says, do you really think that these are long-term injuries for Stokes and Campbell? Or is it just not wanting to play on a 3-6 team? Callum asks as well, is Eric Stokes out for the season? Eric Stokes, LaFleur didn't want to officially commit to that, but he pretty much said he's out for the season. Eric Stokes all week has been in the locker room. He's made sure to still be in there every day. He's in a boot. He's on crutches. He told me on Wednesday that he should know by the end of the week. So this is the end of the week. But he's, just trying to take it one day at a time right now. All of the stuff he said, cliche answer wise, were the things a player says when they're out for the season. And it seemed like even his teammates said, we're going to still have Eric around and we're still going to have him in the building. Those are also the things a teammate says when they feel like their teammate's out for the season. He had an ankle and a knee injury. Seems to me to be more the ankle given the boot. But, I mean, you're over halfway through the season at this point. Even if you go on IR, that's 4 weeks. That means you're coming back week 14. And so at that point, it's kind of like, what's the point of risking it unless you're going to make a playoff push? So, all of that to say, do you feel like we've seen the last of Eric Stokes this season?
Yeah, you have a better handle on this stuff than I do. But I mean, if he can come back and play and he's fully healed, then yeah, they'd want him to come back and play because he needs the playing time. He can get better. But if it's at all, shaky or that, if they're not in the playoff hunt, they're not going to force him back on and put a guy who's, at 75 or 80% or whatever out there either. So we very well might have seen the last one for the season, but I don't know that. And you have a better feel for the injury stuff than I do.
On Wednesday, I asked Matt LaFleur, does that mean you're going to go with the lineup that you've been going with when there's been injuries? And he said, what, you want me to give you my whole lineup? Like, I don't think that's going to change the Dallas Cowboys' ability on Sunday to know exactly who's going to be playing in Eric Stokes' spot. But when Jair was hurt, what they did was they moved Rasul outside and put Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. However, something to also keep in mind is that they signed Jonathan Abram, or they picked up Jonathan Abram on waivers this Wednesday. And Jonathan Abram has played safety while with the Raiders, but coming out of college, he was a nickel safety. And he has played some nickel packages with the Raiders as well. So I don't think they'll change anything. I think they'll still keep Amos and Savage at safety, Douglas outside, Keyshawn in the slot. But having Abram there gives you a little more flexibility. Either put him in the slot, to move Savage up to the slot, and put Abram at safety. You can do a little bit more there when you have that flexibility. But that being said, and I know there's some questions in here about him, so let's talk about Jonathan Abram for just a minute. Pete, this is a former first-round safety. He and Darnell Savage were the two first-round safeties in 2019. Now they are in lockers right next to each other. On paper, that sounds really good for the Packers, but do they really have an advantage here at safety now?
Well, I mean, the Raiders aren't going to cut this guy if he's playing good football. So, because he was not cut for other reasons, it was for performance reasons. So, I am curious to see, if not this week, if sometime in the next few weeks, they actually do give Savage a shot in the slot, see how he does up there. I don't know if Abram is, ready to play a lot this week at safety, but I'll be curious to see if they do, see if a change of position helps Savage out at all. But they're both first-round picks who are really struggling. Savage's tackling has just been a really big issue. I really thought in the last year, or at least two years, or maybe at least this year, that he was going to take off because he's got a lot of talent, but it just does not happen for him.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump to the offensive side of the ball for a minute. Levi asked, does Rodgers not like throwing to the middle of the field? Is that a reason why they never had good tight end production would he waste the Andrews, the Kittles, and the Kelseys of the world? Pete, on Sunday versus Detroit, there were two plays that stand out in my mind. One where he had Tunyon and Lazard both running over the middle, wide open with a step on their guys, and then another where he had DeGuara open down the seam and he threw it to the left corner out of the back of the end zone. Rogers said on Wednesday that with the Tunyon and Lazard play, their spacing was a little off, and so it messed up his eyes. But it's also kind of easy to see, and he admitted that when you watch it back, he should have gotten the ball to one of them. And the same thing on DeGuara. He said, I should have gotten the ball to Josiah there. Does he just not, to go back to Levi's question, does he just not look at the middle of the field?
I mean, I think he does. I think he's completed a lot of balls over the middle of the field. When Jermichael Finley was the tight end in 2010, they actually had the offense was kind of built around Finley. And if you're at training camp, like Finley was catching a ton of passes. And then he went on, like, and I can't remember which week it was, but it was probably about week 4 or 5. He hurt his neck and was done for the year and done for his career. And they actually went on to win the Super Bowl, even though they spent all camp basically working on a passing game around their tight end. But anyway, he's throwing the ball to Finley like crazy then. So he is really interception averse. And so, maybe there are some throws over the middle that he just won't pull the trigger. So, I mean, maybe there's something to what you're saying. I can't say it jumps out to me as an issue, but maybe there's something to that, to what Levi's bringing up there.
And then the one time he really did pull the trigger over the middle on Sunday was to Tunyon in double coverage, and it got picked off.
Yeah, it was, because he like on because I asked him about you said what he said about the two plays. And the DeGuara one, he said, he didn't say how, but he said the timing got messed up on that play. And he kind of equivocated, but then just said, yeah, and I'm even so, I still should have thrown it to him. They were both, you watch them on tape, and those guys are just wide open. Mm-hmm. And he just, apparently what happened on the Lazard-Tunyon one was because Tunyon changed the route, it just startled him, and by the time he figured out what was going on, he felt like it was too late to throw it. So he held the ball, and he ended up getting sacked. But that would have been two really big plays, especially either Lazard or Tunyon. They would have had a decent chance of scoring a pretty long touchdown.
Which I get that, but that's an explanation I would expect to hear from Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, not an 18-year 4-time MVP vet.
It was shocking. I mean, our Tom Silverstein and Leroy Butler went over that play with their tape review. They do that early in the week. That was one of the couple plays they covered, and you could tell Leroy was he had no explanation for why Rodgers didn't throw it.
Right. Let me get back up here to this question. John asked, who is going to take Romeo Doubs' spot on Sunday against the Cowboys? And it sounds a little weird to say, like, oh, this rookie receiver has thrown their entire offense into a tailspin when he's not out there. But that's kind of what happened against Detroit. The receivers, a couple of them said after the game, when Romeo went out, we lost a lot of packages that we could do. And so how do you replace that?
You just do it collectively, and it's all the usual suspects, right? And I mean, isn't that funny how Toure has gone from being not suiting up to all of a sudden he's a fairly important player, and he's showing some ability. So they have to be happy about that. They got a couple guys on the practice squad, who they'd have to sign to the roster. One they can promote. So we'll probably see that. But it's just going to have to be, collectively. Guys are, Lazard, all those guys, they're going to have to play a lot of snaps, and losing Doubs hurts because, he's one of their most talented guys. But Watson's going to play this week, right?
Yes.
So they'll have him back too. So that that'll help.
He's completely out of concussion protocol. And that's actually, he didn't have another concussion versus Detroit. That's just, they had to list it as something. And since that's what he had been in last week, that's what he was listed on Wednesday on the injury report. but he was actually hit in the ribs, which is why he was so confused why he couldn't go back in. But just because of what had happened in Buffalo, they were being cautious. Um, this is a good question from Karen. So let's jump back to the safeties for a minute. She said, "Not to be mean, but is there any hope for Savage?"
Yeah, I don't know, Karen. I mean, last year I would have at this time or even late in the year, I would have said, yeah, oh yeah, there's still plenty of hope. I don't know now. That's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer for you. But man, we're 4 years in. It's if it ain't happening by now, I just don't know that it's ever going to happen.
Hmm. They also lost Rashawn Gary in Detroit with an ACL tear.
Unless by chance moving him to slot corner revives his career. By the
Right.
way, sorry about that, Kassidy.
Oh no, right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Rashawn Gary, arguably their best player on defense, one of the top two players on the team, is out for the rest of the year and into next year with an ACL tear. Actually, he might be ready by the beginning of next season. I mean, if you think about it, Elton Jenkins tore his ACL in Week 8 last year, right? He was ready by the beginning of this season.
He did, but even look at how he's missing practice and
Mhm.
didn't he missed a game a couple weeks ago. Um,
Yeah, but that wasn't the knee. That was because he got stepped on in practice.
yeah, that's true. I would they always say 9 to 12 months. I would say just I think it's smart to assume it's at least 10 months before he's back and game
Hmm.
ready. At least 10 months.
Yeah. Levi asked, "How do they make up for the loss of Gary? Do they blitz more?" I That's my answer, but I'm interested to see what you want to say, Pete. And just to add on to this, how much does it help? Obviously, he's not Rashawn Gary, but how much does it help to have seen Kingsley and Igbare come along so quickly as a rookie?
Yeah, it helps because at camp, I don't. I mean, he had a play here and there, but almost everybody in camp does. So in camp, I didn't think, you know, much of the guy one way or the other. Didn't see much one way or the other, and he's doing okay, and he's getting to the quarterback, so it helps some. But they're losing a premier, a top, I don't know, 10 pass rusher at least,
Mhm.
maybe better than that, probably better than that. So it hurts a lot. And yeah, they're going to have to blitz. Walker, they've been sending him a little more in the last 3 weeks or so. Um, I think Keyshawn Nixon blitzed a few times last week. So, some corner blitzes. So I would assume we'll see more of that. They got to do something because you just can't let quarterbacks stand there safe and sound or they'll pick you apart.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with Matt's question as well. Could they move Quay Walker to edge rusher? He's fast, and they need to disrupt the quarterback. I mean, is he lithe enough to be an edge rusher? Is that a good solution without Gary?
I haven't seen him do it. I'd like to see him like in camp and one-on-one drills. I'd like to see him do it just to see how he does. But sure, that's definitely an option.
Mhm.
Lining him up out there and giving him a go at it. He's explosive, an explosive athlete. He's on the light side, 235 or whatever he weighs. So that's pretty light for an edge rusher. But I'm sure it's at least a possibility. I don't know how much he's worked there. I don't know how much they want to move him around considering he's a rookie, but sure, I could see it.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, if you kept him at linebacker, but like moved him more to the outside, and then just walk him up on certain
And
downs.
I think they've kind of lined him up there a couple times this year where he's been over there. So yeah, and we're later in the season, so they should have the player should even as a rookie he should have a much better feel for the scheme. They should be
Mhm.
able to do a little more with him than they were doing 2 months ago.
Yeah. Let's flip back to offense real quick. Gary asked, "Do you think Bakhtiari would be traded or released in the offseason?" When he's out there, Pete, he still looks like he's pretty much on top of his game. Is it worth losing him?
I'm going on the assumption that he's going to be cut in the offseason, just unless they rework his contract. But even then, if it's week to week where you don't know till 2 hours before kickoff whether he's going to play for you, that's just an
Mhm.
awful tough way to go through a season and plan and all that. So um, I'm basically assuming he's going to get cut in the offseason. I don't know that for a fact, but I think that's the most likely option, by quite a bit.
Mhm. Um, there was a question in here about McCarthy, which we have actually not talked about yet. So let's jump on McCarthy for just a minute before we get sign off. John Wayne asked, Peter, you gonna clap for McCarthy walking out on Sunday?
I will
John,
not
there is no cheering in the press box.
That's right. That's right. It'll be interesting to see I'm guessing he'll get a nice reception. I think time has passed and people will appreciate. I mean, he helped Favre. You know, Favre needed a little firmer hand, and he provided that. Uh, Rodgers, all that development happened. McCarthy some credit. Won a Super Bowl. He's got a street named after him. So
I think we lost you. There you are, Pete. We just lost your sound, is all. Well, while we wait and see if Pete can come back in, I'm gonna pop another question up here. Levi asked, could they call up Kevin King if Stokes is done for the year? Um, it's always a possibility. Kevin King has definitely been watching all of these games. I know that he tweets through the entire game. Um, I, there's a reason they cut him. That's what you have to keep in mind. However, he does know the defense. He knows this locker room. He could slide right back in. If you're in a pickle, um, I guess that's not the worst option. But I also think that with the pieces they have in place now, with Rasul and Nixon, Jair seems to be healthy. I don't think you necessarily need to do that. So, well, I think that we have lost Pete. Oh, the power on his computer went out. That'll happen to you every now and then. But we have to head to the locker room anyways, so we're going to say goodbye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to follow Spoon's live blog before and during the game on Sunday. And then Pete and I will be here for you post game Facebook Live, and we'll have the Green 19 post game podcast as well. Don't forget, next week there's a Thursday night game, so the schedule will get mixed up a little bit, but we'll keep you updated on what to expect. And stay tuned to PackersNews.com for full coverage. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time.